Welcome to lesson number 20. This is our last lesson in our unit on Jesus Christ. The title of today's lesson is Christ's Ascension. Today's question is, why does Christ's ascension give us great comfort? In this picture you see a lost boy. Maybe you remember a time when you were younger and you were in a store and you couldn't find your mom or your dad. Parents usually won't let their children wander around unless they're supervised by adults, because they might get lost and who knows what could happen then. The disciples didn't think they were ready to carry out their ministry without Jesus being present. They had come to rely and appreciate his presence and companionship. They were probably saddened and maybe a little nervous when they saw him ascend into heaven. Unlike the disciples, Christians today find great comfort in his ascension. We'll have two church words today. The first one is ascension, which is when Jesus went back to heaven. Our second church word is Judgment Day, which is a day of great rejoicing for believers. Jesus Christ will come back and judge the living and the dead. We'll start with a story. As his family drove to the cemetery in silence after his grandmother's funeral, Jason's mind went back over the service. His heart had never ached like it had that afternoon. But he heard the words from the pastor that made him feel much better. These are the words that he heard. John 14, verses 2 and 3. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am. Those words reminded him that Jesus has prepared a place for us in heaven. He did this through his work of redemption, by living a perfect life and then giving up his life on the cross and rising from the dead. The scriptures give us a very accurate description of Jesus' ascension. Acts chapter 1 verses 9 through 13 tell us, after he said this, he was taken up before their very eyes, and a cloud hid him from their sight. They were looking intently up into the sky as he was going, when suddenly two men dressed in white stood beside them. Men of Galilee, they said, why do you stand here looking into the sky? The same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven. According to the scripture passage, Jesus disappeared behind a cloud. 11 apostles and 2 angels were standing on the ground. Jesus went back to heaven in triumph because he had conquered sin, death, and the devil. His work of redemption was complete. God accepted Jesus' sacrifice for the sins of all people. Our first takeaway is Christ's ascension assures us that he has earned a place for us in heaven. For our second main point, I'd like to read you a psalm. Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by night, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. We are incredibly blessed. We have a God who continues to watch over us. Our help comes from him, and he cares for us. God uses some of the things in our lives that don't seem so good for our good. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 reminds us of that. Even when something seems awful, God can still use that to benefit us. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. These Bible passages lead us to our second takeaway and our last takeaway today, which says Christ's ascension assures us that he has earned heaven for us, that he is ruling over us to keep us safe for everlasting life in heaven. Our key passages for today are John chapter 14, verses 2 and 3, and Ephesians chapter 1, verses 20 and 21.